Mega Man 8 was released for the PlayStation 1 and the Sega Saturn in the late 90s. Its most iconic version is the one on PlayStation, given the fact that it was a significantly more popular console between the two. However, would it surprise you to know that there is a world where this game never made it to the PS1 in the West? Let's talk about it. I went over this in my revisit to Mega Man X4 a few years back, but it bears repeating when discussing Mega Man 8. The game launched in Japan on PS1 in 1996 and on Saturn in 1997. But Sony of America initially rejected the release of Mega Man 8 on PS1 because back then Sony had a policy that prohibited 2D games on the console. The mid-90s was when 3D graphics went mainstream in video games. It all looks crude now, but I would argue that the jump from the games of the early 90s to the mid-90s was the biggest leap the gaming industry has ever seen. Sony only wanted cutting-edge 3D games in their console, stuff like Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, or Crash Bandicoot. When developing Mega Man 8, Capcom decided to use the power the PS1 and Saturn granted them to make a 2D game like all the other Mega Man games, just now with higher visual fidelity. But take a game like Mega Man 8 or Mega Man X4 and they just don't look that mind-blowing compared to what 3D games were doing, since it was just a refinement of what players already knew from the past 10 plus years of gaming. The mid to late 90s had a really heavy anti-2D games bias. Just look at how the gaming press covered an iconic classic game like Castlevania Symphony of the Night compared to the 3D Castlevania 64, when the reputations of these games are completely switched now. Sony's anti-2D game policy is accredited to Bernie Stolar, who was the executive vice president of Sony Computer Entertainment America around the launch of the PlayStation in the United States. He's credited for many negative things in the gaming industry, this just being one of them. He later left PlayStation and moved to Sega, and is considered a crucial part of tanking the Sega Saturn in the West when he said the console was not the company's future midway through its life cycle. But that's a story for another day. He wasn't some supervillain, though. He signed off on many classic games like Crash and Spyro, and strategized the launch of the Sega Dreamcast when he was still at Sega. So it's a conflicting legacy in the gaming sphere, but he passed away a couple years ago, so may he rest in peace. But back on subject, how did Capcom get past this anti-2D game policy? Well, as soon as Sony found out that the Saturn was getting Mega Man 8, they changed their tune because they didn't want that console getting exclusive games under their nose. So they would allow Mega Man 8 on PS1 on one condition. The game comes with some kind of exclusive thing that Saturn players wouldn't get. The PS1 version launched with a 10th anniversary art book because it had been 10 years since Mega Man 1 came out. That was apparently enough to satisfy Sony. This is ironic because, as we'll discuss later, the PS1 disc technically has less content on it than the Saturn version. But the company later dropped this 2D policy, and thus 2D Mega Man games were released on PS1 without issue going forward. But it's impressive that a 2D platformer from 1996 could have such ceaseless drama occur over it while it was in the process of being localized. But the final product was a game people liked.
Mega Man 8!
Mega Man 8 is not an entry you hear about often when people bring up the best or their favorite Mega Man games, but I've never heard anyone say it was outright bad. They'll laugh at the cutscenes more than anything else, but the game was considered another safe, easy, enjoyable Mega Man game when it was released. Like Mega Man 7, I've seen more positivity going in Mega Man 8's direction since it was included in the Mega Man Legacy Collection 2 in 2017. As I've discussed before, the nostalgia started wearing off on the first 3 Mega Man games in the last decade, and now more new fans were able to appreciate the quality design of Mega Man's 4 through 8. Speaking for myself, I first played Mega Man 8 back in 2015 like all the rest of the Mega Man games, and did a Let's Play on it in 2016. Yada yada yada, we've been over this before. But for some reason, I always hated Mega Man 8 when I first played it, and especially when I did the LP on it in 2016. Perhaps it was because it was the only one where I didn't have access to save states, so I thought it was harder than the others. I have no idea, because this game isn't even remotely near the conversation of the hardest Mega Man games. So that was a classic skill issue, no doubt. I last played this game about 4 years ago and concluded that it was a decent time. Going into this video, I figured I'd enjoy it again. So after playing it 3 more times, what is my assessment on it? Well, let's find out. Since the PS1 and Saturn both used CDs as their format, the devs used that to their advantage to put full animated cutscenes in the game. The story begins in outer space as 2 figures duke it out and crash land on Earth, while Mega Man and Bass battle again.
Mega Man, today we finish this!
Hey, Bass! Why must I fight you? We are not enemies!
Shut up!
I can at least compliment the fact that the cutscenes look pretty good for PS1 standards, obvious compression artifacts aside. I can get to the voiceover quality later, but for now, Dr. Light tells Mega Man to investigate the crash site, beginning the intro stage. Once you get into gameplay, it's pretty apparent how good Mega Man 8 looks. I think Mega Man 8 and Mega Man X4 are the best looking Mega Man side-scrollers to ever be made. The colors pop, the effects are great, and visually diverse things can happen on the screen, from varied enemies to contrasting backgrounds and foregrounds. The game just looks really appealing. I liked Mega Man's sprite design in 7 more than 8, but this is certainly the most detailed Mega Man sprite we've ever gotten. The intro stage of Mega Man 8 establishes much more than how good the graphics are, though. As you might expect, Mega Man controls the same as he has in the last several games. However, in this one, you can fully customize the button layout. The largest pro of doing this is that in Mega Man 8 you can still use the Mega Buster shots while a special weapon is equipped, so you can control which button uses the special weapon and which uses the regular shot. In Mega Man 8 and X4, Square uses the special and Triangle uses the default, but then X5 and X6 flipped that. Which one is better for you is something you can experiment, though weirdly, I always find it more comfortable when playing 8 and X4 to use this layout, but then in X5 and X6 to use the ones that those games have. But if I ever use the X5 and 6 layout in Mega Man 8 and X4, it always feels wrong and vice versa. Perhaps that's just muscle memory. Who knows? Mega Man might feel a little slow in this one at the start, but I kind of felt like that was a result of just how much more screen real estate there is on PS1 compared to the earlier games. Otherwise, the jumps felt right and the controls worked just as well as they did in Mega Man 7, though according to the comments, many seemed to not like the heavier controls of Mega Man 7 and Mega Man 8. But I was able to get to grips with it just fine. The intro stage showcases the exploration element of Mega Man 8 and its new default power-up, the Mega Ball, but it quickly ends after that, so you don't really get to work with it too much. Dr. Wily escapes with some mysterious orb thing, and Mega Man finds one of the robots in the intro and takes him to Dr. Light for examination. Meanwhile, Wily has 4 Robot Masters on the loose for Mega Man to stop: Clown Man, Grenade Man, Frost Man, and Tengu Man. The structure is the same as Mega Man 7, with 4 Robot Masters, a middle stage, 4 more Robot Masters, and the Fortress segment. While I'm sitting here on the stage select screen, I have to make the most obscure reference in the history of humanity, but maybe someone out there will get me. Mega Man 8 has a really chill-sounding menu theme, but when I first played this game, I had the biggest brain blast hearing this music, because when I was like 8 years old watching YouTube, I'd like to watch the Sonic videos from a channel called Sonic Song 182, and they'd open every video with this. I always thought that opening music was kinda catchy, but then like 8 years later I discovered it was from Mega Man 8. So yeah, there's that. In theory, Mega Man 8 gains the same advantage that Mega Man 7 did by splitting the 8 Robot Masters into 2 halves. It makes it so that there can be 4 easier stages to pick at first, letting players get to grips with the game, and then 4 more difficult, demanding stages now that the player gets the game. However, in execution, I think Mega Man 7 had a more consistently good roster of stages. In Mega Man 8, I just never vibed with the early levels as much. After doing 3 playthroughs for the video, I don't think they're bad by any means, I just have some issues that weigh them down. All 4 of these levels are pretty long. In fact, they're long enough to where there's now a permanent checkpoint system implemented. If you get halfway through a stage and get a game over, you'll return to the halfway point. Longer levels aren't an issue, but it's what Mega Man 8's early levels spend that time on which I don't care for as much. Take Tengu Man, for example. This level has some cool platforming with the wind pushing you forward that you need to react to, but then half the stage is this shooter segment. Mega Man stands on top of Rush Jet and you blast whatever comes your way, and you can also be aided by Rush, Eddie, Beat, and Otto for a nice colorful display of attacks and explosions, but the segment just lacks substance compared to the main platforming action. And then Frostman's stage needs no introduction. You ride a snowboard for half of it and need to react as this voice tells you what buttons to press.
Jump! Slide! Jump!
If I'm honest, I didn't find these segments to be that troublesome during this playthrough. I just did what I was told and reacted fast enough to not die. However, again, most of the stage is this. I like the parts that aren't, it's more Mega Man action that I came to play, but these parts just slow the game down. Clown Man's level is all regular Mega Man action, but this one just felt too long, as it would introduce new gimmicks to spice it up throughout, but by the time you're doing this vertical climb at the end where you need to guess which platform is the right one to stand on to progress, I just feel like the level has overstayed its welcome. It took me 7 minutes to get from the start to the boss door on my second playthrough of this one. Grenade Man is easily the best stage of these 4. It's the shortest, but it's packed with good design, like trying to outrun these blocks before they explode or jumping through these swinging things. While the level design may be a mixed bag in the pacing and platforming departments, what you can pull off in these stages while exploring does deserve some props. The new tool I mentioned, the Mega Ball, is a really fun upgrade. As a weapon, you use it by pressing the attack button to kick. Holding up on the D-pad while doing so changes the angle of the shot, which, fun fact, can net you an extra life at the start of Clown Man stage. It does a lot of great damage to mini-bosses and enemies, but as a platforming tool it's really useful since you can jump on it and get extra height and just keep doing it to break the game. I tried doing that to get past this bubble section of Tengu Man stage, but I sucked at it. It was worth a try though. If you want to see some sick Mega Ball strats, check out what Magnus Zero was able to do in his playthrough. Now that was a clean run. But even if you aren't a speedrunning weapon master, the Mega Ball is a useful tool in exploring the stages because of Mega Man 8's shop system. It's a lot different than how it was in Mega Man 7. This time, the shop isn't for goodies. In fact, Mega Man 8 removed items like E-Tanks and Weapon Tanks. Instead, the shop only has upgrades to Mega Man's abilities, like climbing up ladders faster, shooting more shots at once, and not getting knocked back when hit. You need bolts to buy the upgrades, but unlike Mega Man 7 where you could get 999 bolts and buy stuff, this game only has 40 bolts, and they're a one-time use item. To get them all, you need to explore the stages in depth. There will be many you can only get with special weapons, like the Flame Sword in this box in Clown Man stage, and many you can only reach by bouncing up with the Mega Ball. Mega Man 8 really gets to make use of the special weapons more than ever before in combat, platforming, and exploration. I like that idea. It definitely took cues from the exploration element of the Mega Man X games in the process, though I don't like how it necessitates backtracking if you wanted to get them all. Many bolts need the Astro Crush weapon to get, but you only get that in the second half of the game, so you need to replay earlier stages to get all their hidden bolts. Maybe that would be fine, but I don't feel a lot of incentive to do so. First, because I'm not really dying to replay Tengu Man or Frost Man stage in a single playthrough, but also because it's impossible to buy everything in Mega Man 8's shop. There just aren't enough bolts, and this could be seen as a positive as it makes players choose what upgrades they want the most. I think it would have worked if the game made it so you couldn't afford everything in one run, but then maybe you unlock a New Game Plus option after beating it so that playing old stages with later weapons would be more satisfying, as you collect bolts you missed to buy upgrades you didn't have, making Mega Man a true force to be reckoned with by the end. As it stands, I see where they were coming from with the shop system, and I do like it enough. In my playthroughs, I buy the Hyper Slide for faster sliding, the Arrow Shot for a better charge shot that splits in 5 ways when hitting an enemy, and the fast charging to reduce wait time between shots. That turns Mega Man into a beast already. And I do like the idea of integrating special weapons this much into exploring stages, but it's not my favorite Mega Man game to complete when the early levels aren't the most replayable. But again, I do like the idea of using special weapons for exploring. See my Mega Man X coverage for more reasons why. In this game, Mega Man doesn't have any of the classic Rush abilities, nor can he merge with Rush. Instead, you get 4 Rush upgrades by defeating mini-bosses, and these were mostly useless. The Rush question sees him drop in and leave an item, but sometimes he doesn't do that at all. It's pretty random. The Rush Bike is what it sounds like. Rush turns into a bike, and it gives you a longer jump and can allow you to move faster, but there aren't a lot of segments where this would be useful. The Rush Bomber allows Mega Man to call in for a fucking airstrike, but I didn't use this much either. The Rush Charger is the most useful one because he drops health and weapon energy. It felt basically required to beat the final boss since there are no E-Tanks in this game. Once you've cleared the first 4 Robot Master stages, it's time for the middle stage. Mega Man has been collecting these orbs from the defeated bosses, and Dr. Light concludes it's some kind of evil energy that Wily mustn't get his hands on. But the robot from the intro named Duo wakes up and blasts off as Mega Man gives chase. There's pretty much nothing special about this level at all. If you play it on PlayStation, that is. It's just a linear path towards a brief Duo boss fight. But if you take this upper path here, you can find a bolt in both versions. However, in the Sega Saturn version, this will lead to a rematch with Cutman from Mega Man 1. Defeating him rewards you with a bolt. Later in the game, you can find Woodman from Mega Man 2 in Searchman stage, which also rewards you with a bolt. In the background, you get these sick remixes of their respective stage themes, which is pretty cool. But that's the only content difference between the PS1 version and the Saturn version. Honestly, I was kinda surprised. I had only ever fully played Mega Man 8 on PS1 before, but the comments on Mega Man 7 got really antsy about how I had to play it on Saturn. I was already going to play it twice anyway, but the differences were pretty insubstantial in my opinion. These bonus bosses are nice, and I'm not sure why they weren't in the PS1 version. In fact, I'm not sure why Capcom didn't just use these bosses as the exclusive feature to get Sony to approve the game, but either way I can take it or leave it. Otherwise, the Saturn version does have higher quality sound. Here's a brief comparison. But that also doesn't really impact the play experience much for me. So yeah, the Saturn version is technically more complete, but I'm probably going to keep revisiting this game on my PS1 disc, which is also significantly cheaper than it ever would be to get a US Saturn disc of this game. Since I'm talking about sound quality at the midpoint of the game, it seems like a good time to bring up the elephant in the room with this game's story. Mega Man 8 was the first game in the series to use full voice acting. These cutscenes and the ones from Mega Man X4, which used the same actors, have been memed to hell and back. There really isn't much I could add to it. Every character feels miscast, there are poor line reads throughout, and just odd direction as well.
Don't run away, coward. You'll pay for this insult. I'll be back.
We must recover all the energy immediately, Mega Man.
But where is Dr. Wily?
That's a good question. We may be able to locate another energy emission from the radar room. When we find that meteor, we'll find Dr. Wily.
The Robot Masters are especially weird.
See you in my dreams.
Mega Man screaming for 15 seconds is a particularly funny example. But what I would like to bring up is that the voice of Mega Man was a woman named Ruth Mary Jarman. People often complain about the fact that Mega Man has this really feminine voice in this game, but that actually is a common practice in the industry, letting adult women play young boy characters. Think of Tara Strong being the voice of 10-year-old Ben Tennyson. But anyway, Miss Jarman did an interview with a fellow I know named Coleman X on his Rambling Reploids podcast in 2021. She had a lot of interesting stuff to say, including the fact that she didn't know she was in two different games for years after the fact. She was the voice of Mega Man in Mega Man 8, but also the voice of Mega Man X in X4.
Sorry about that.
But the directors just asked for the lines and never specified what it would be, so it was not known to the largely reused cast that two different games were being recorded for, which blows my mind. She also said that it was recorded in 1993 or 1994 when the game was not released in the US until 1997. That's also nutty because that would mean Mega Man 8 and X4 voiceover was recorded before the releases of Mega Man 7 and X3. But most importantly, she had a whole point about why she thought Mega Man was given this voice despite the name Mega Man. And I thought it was really eloquent. The US production team clearly put a lot more stock into the man part of the name than Japan just by looking at the art, when culturally speaking, the term would mean something much different over there.
Your point that you just brought up is critical to this conversation because the connection of man at the end of Mega Man, or as it's known in Japan as Rokuman, in Japan, they will say, instead of key person, they'll say keyman is how you express the concept of key person. It's keyman here. If you do sales and if you're a salesperson in Japan, you're called Eigyoman with the MAN at the end. Eigyoman, it's how they import certain words into Japanese. So I guarantee you, as we would say in Hawaii, Garens Barbarans, that's what we say. I guarantee you that when they thought of the name Mega Man in Japan, they were not specifically going to target it only at boys. It was like Mega Man is kind of like the mega person that we can all relate to.
That logic made me feel less harsh about this voice of Mega Man. However, I still would have cast somebody else as Mega Man X, since his character is supposed to be a robotic late teen or early adult compared to Mega Man, who was a robotic child. But still, that's my take on the voice acting. It's pretty bad, but very interesting nevertheless. And I have nothing but respect for everyone who worked on it. Voice acting in games was very new at the time, so making it work was something that would take trial and error to figure out. Moving right along, Mega Man can't get to Wily's castle quite yet, and to do so, you need to complete Aquaman, Swordman, Searchman, and Astroman stages. The level design definitely picks up here. As established, these are the harder stages. What I love about them is how they integrated the weapons you already have into the level design. The Thunder Claw is used to swing from point to point, and you'll have to get to grips with it to complete Searchman's stage. Enemies right on the ground will be easy to dispose of with the Mega Ball or the Ice Wave. The Flash Bomb will do great chip damage to most anything it encounters. The Ice Wave will also be needed to get through the flames of Swordman stage, as will the Tornado Hold to solve these puzzles. These weapons are well utilized in the stages, and I think the designs are pretty good too. Aquaman stage revolves around the new swimming controls. Mega Man functions the same underwater as he always has with the high jump, but now he can swim too. It doesn't add too much, so I see why it didn't return in later games, but it does work in this one stage. Astro Man's level can be a bit cumbersome with these mazes you need to get through, but I was able to get to grips with it relatively quickly. I really liked the last 4 stages. I thought they had great opportunities for exploration, platforming, and weapon use, and they didn't break the pace up with gimmicks too often either. But something I did find quite interesting about the boss chain of Mega Man 8 is that it has 2 separate weakness chains. Even though Mega Man 7 split the boss roster in 2, you could still seamlessly use boss weaknesses on all of them. Slash Man was weak to both Freeze Man and Turbo Man's weapon for that purpose, who I mistakenly called Torch Man in the last video when describing this fact, because Turbo Man's weapon was called the Scorch Wheel, and I somehow just mixed up the words. And then I didn't even notice it when voicing it or editing it. It just so happened that Torch Man is actually a boss in Mega Man 11. Go figure. The Mega Man 7 video was one where I talked about my poor observational skills, and that video features an example of it just a few moments later. You couldn't have written better irony if you tried. Anyway, in Mega Man 8, Clown Man is an easy first pick, and then you go to Grenade Man, Frost Man, and Tengu Man. None of these weapons here are the weaknesses of the other 4 bosses. You just start again with Aquaman, an easy boss, and you use his weapon on Swordman, then Searchman, and then Astroman, whose weapon is the weakness of Aquaman. This isn't a positive or negative, it's just something I noticed. The boss design is pretty approachable and easy in this game, except for Tengu Man. He kicked my butt when I tried him without a weakness. However, that's mostly thanks to my always playing on the offense. If you wait and take it slow, he shouldn't be a problem. An interesting facet of the bosses in Mega Man 8 is how some of the weaknesses are like puzzles to solve. Tornado Hold only freezes Clown Man in place for a bit when he's swinging around, so you can get some easy damage in that way. And then the Ice Wave only works on Tengu Man when he's briefly on the ground, otherwise it won't hit him. And then others like Astro Man are the usual Mega Man fare of spamming the attack until you win. I definitely prefer it to be like Tengu Man. That way, it ensures the weakness gives you an edge, but it's not an instant win button. As is tradition, beating all 8 Robot Masters brings you to Wily's castle. This one also doesn't really light the world on fire. The first one brings back the snowboard gameplay for pretty much the entire stage. It's a gimmick I'm pretty indifferent on, like I said, so one more round of it is playable, but not that interesting. The boss fight here requires the Mega Ball to beat, so best hope you knew how to angle the attack or you might be here for a while. But hey, the music's kinda cool for this stage. But that goes for every Wily Castle stage theme in Mega Man 8, my favorite being Wily Castle 2. However, this level is less fun than the previous one because it sees the return of the flying shooter section. And it was here where I learned how BS it is that the speed you go at in reverse is really low, so that got me a game over in one of my runs. Be sure to use your shots carefully in the boss fight too. It is most weak to Astro Crush, but that only has 4 shots. Once that's done, Wily Castle 3 is the first one with no weird gimmick, just Mega Man platforming, and for that reason I find it the most fun. I like this part where you're going above spikes and can only be saved by this enemy throwing a boulder to stand on. You could fight him and grab the health next to him, or Mega Ball jump over him, which is always satisfying to pull off. The stage is a bit short though. Its main purpose is housing a battle with Bass, who's fused with Treble and Evil Energy, but he can be defeated pretty easily with some charge shots. And then the stage ends with a battle against the Green Devil, but this is probably the easiest devil monster in series history. The Thunderclaw does a lot of damage to it. Wily Castle 4 unsurprisingly houses both a boss rush and the final boss. Again with this absolute crap. Getting a game over at the final Wily battle just means you have to stand there refighting all the same bosses again, where you largely effortlessly decimate them with the weakness weapons. But as the comments keep showing me, many a Mega Man fan would not have it any other way. Some find it a showing of growth. I don't agree. Countless games can show you how you've grown without standing there for 5 minutes bored out of your skull fighting the same bosses you already beat. You know what feels like player growth to me? In Resident Evil 4, yeah, I haven't mentioned that game enough on this show, you fight the same village enemies for the whole early game, and they're pretty tough. But then you face tougher challenges later, and then when you fight the village enemies again in the mines, they're pretty easy to dispose of. It was a quick and effortless way to show player growth, but I don't think this even is about growth anyway. For at least 6 of these bosses, I already had their weaknesses when I fought them the first time, so it's the exact same fight from before. Boring, padded garbage that artificially raises the stakes of the final boss. The first phase of Wily Machine 8 is actually pretty easy once you get to grips with it. First time around, I thought I needed to Mega Ball jump to avoid damage from the laser, but no, you just need to shoot the laser with the charge shot and that will close it. From there, it's somewhat easy to dodge the spinning blade attacks and get hits in. The final battle with Wily Capsule 8 is almost the exact same boss as Wily Capsule 7, which was basically the same final boss as Mega Man's 4 through 6. Only this is much less punishing than Mega Man 7's final battle. The sphere attacks just do less damage and are far easier to dodge, so once I got to grips with Phase 1 and used Rush to drop health in for Phase 2, it was pretty simple to win. Mega Man, Duo, and Proto Man were all working together, only of course Mega Man was doing all the actual work. Duo ultimately saves Mega Man's life and gives him to Proto Man. Duo's deal is that he's a defender of justice from outer space, but sees how heroic Mega Man is and thinks the Earth is best left to him, taking off to parts unknown. The rest of the cast glad to see Mega Man back in one piece. While Mega Man gets oddly emotional over Duo's departure, which I thought was odd given Duo's like 1 minute of screen time. Guess Mega Man's just a nice guy like that, even though of course Wily escaped yet again to fight another day. Ending Mega Man 8. You know, this script felt kind of negative to write, but it's definitely not because I didn't enjoy the game. I played it 3 times for the video, like I said. For both this and Mega Man 7, I played it that many times because I felt like it. I enjoy Mega Man 8. I think it's a fun game. Sure, the video has gone over some systems and ideas I don't think Mega Man 8 executed on as well as it could have, like the shop system or the gimmicky early levels, but on the whole, I think the game is pretty good. These flaws were easy to overlook or adapt to on repeat playthroughs to enjoy a game that was well worth enjoying. It had smooth gameplay, great aesthetics, and more solid levels than not. Even the ones I thought weren't paced the best still had good moments. I think it's an enjoyable title, one I could go back to without issue in the future. It's definitely not my favorite Mega Man game, but it's good. And that's more than enough for me, regardless of whatever I felt like criticizing while making a video on its ups and downs. But that's pretty much all I've got to say for this one. Solid time, I recommend it to anyone who enjoys good 2D platformers. But next up is the last Mega Man video I'm going to make for the next few months. It's the game best understood as a sort of Mega Man 8.5. That would be Mega Man and Bass, which came out on the Super Nintendo in 1998. There's a huge story behind why that is, but it's best saved for next time. Mega Man and Bass is one of the most infamously disliked classic Mega Man titles, so I can't wait to rip it apart next time. Nah, I'm just kidding, that's not gonna happen. See everyone next time as we'll see what will happen. And as always, if you made it this far into the video, thanks for watching.